Let me get to Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
It is a pleasure. I'm good. We had a great weekend, family we haven't seen for a long time, and we ate a little too much. And
good.
And one of them was a couple of them were from New Mexico and live at an elevation about 7,000 feet, so we had to watch them carefully in the Mississippi heat. Go out and fan them when they decided to walk outside for a while. I want to ask you about the elections over there, but first of all, your take on what is going on. You've been in politics, global politics, for a long time. There are people in the UK and every part of the world worried about what is happening in America. I don't think a lot of people understand how it resonates overseas as it does here.
People around the world, particularly Western countries, very much look at America, and they look to America for leadership. They look to America. America's the country that rescued them from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. People look at America and they look to the United States. But I think something interesting is happening around the Western world, Paul. I think that elections around the world are the story of the two I's, inflation and immigration. Governments around the world that have lost control of both of them, lost control of inflation and lost control of immigration, are being punished by their voters. You see it in France, you see it in Europe, you see it in Britain, and I think you might see it soon in America.
Is England moving, the UK moving more left or right with this election, though?
Well, something really interesting happened. A massive majority for a very left-wing government. And if you stop and look at the headlines, it looks as though Britain has lurched to the left.
Yes.
But here's the interesting thing. The left got 2/3 of all the seats in the British Parliament. 2 out of every 3 are now left-wing seats. But they only got 1/3 of the vote. And you might ask, hang on, what's going on here? How can that be? The story of the UK election is really a story of the Conservatives fragmenting into 2 blocks. The official Conservatives are so monumentally useless. They're so false as Conservatives. They're so sort of Rockefeller Republican type Conservatives that basically half their vote abandoned them. So the Conservative vote split between the official Conservatives and this new insurgent Conservative Party, Reform, which won seats for the first time. And as a result of that, it's let the left in. But I think the real story is not how the left has won the election in the UK. It's how the Conservatives, having promised to be conservative, have failed. They've 14 years of failure. They've been elected and failed to do anything conservative with it. In fact, they've done some pretty left-wing things with it.
Douglas, how do you, if you're trying to give us an example of this, because we're a little confused sometimes on the matter. As a matter of fact, your elections over there don't come up every 4 years or 6 years, or do they?
They're not fixed term. They're not fixed term.
Somebody can call an election at any time?
Yeah, the Prime Minister, or rather the King, formally can call an election. There's a maximum 5-year term, but it's flexible. And it's just a different system. It's not worse, it's not better, it's just different. So it means that when you're elected to Parliament, you've got a maximum 5-year term, but it might be a lot shorter.
It's almost like a recall, automatic recall, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I served for 12 years in the British Parliament, and I stood for 4 elections, partly because I actually called an election on myself. I called a special election on myself when
Really?
I changed parties, and I hate these politicians who shift parties and change loyalties without getting the approval of their constituents. So that's what I did. I changed to Nigel Farage's new party, the precursor of the one that's now won 5 seats. Actually, in the same district, I represented the same district that Nigel Farage has just been elected to. And when I changed from the official Conservative Party, which wasn't really conservative, to the proper Conservative Party that hadn't actually got any seats, I called a special election on myself.
So what kind of power does Nigel have going back in now, as far as numbers?
Very small. He's 6 MPs out of 650. But don't be fooled, because he's the authentic voice of Conservative Britain now, he will get a lot of attention, and I think the official Conservative Party has got an existential crisis on its hands. It's full of career politicians who don't really understand the meaning of conservatism. They've failed to deliver conservative policies. Actually, I think there's probably a lesson closer to home for that. If you're a conservative who's elected to office and you fail to actually do conservative things, the real danger is you you end up like British conservatives. Mississippi Republicans don't end up like British conservatives.
So those are your rhino conservatives, basically.
Yeah, and just do-nothing conservatives. Conservatives who think it's okay to be conservative because you, in the case of Mississippi, happen to hunt or have the right bumper stickers, but don't actually deliver things like school choice and tax elimination.
From your allies, from your friends.
Oops, sorry. As a matter of fact, that was a soundbite that was kicked off there. Here goes our leader. And when we were talking about this, I think the world is watching, and they're kind of worried about it. But and at the same time, some of them are probably worried as much about Donald Trump making them pay or putting them in line. I'm not sure. It depends on the country. But here is a couple of sound bites.
From your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in. What will you do?
I'm not going to answer that question. It's not going to happen.
What's your plan to turn the campaign around?
You saw it today. How many people do you draw crowds like I drew today? You find me more enthusiastic than today?
Wow. I mean, I don't think we want to play the crowd game. Donald Trump can draw big crowds. There's no question about that.
I didn't draw a big crowd, but what does he say?
That's embarrassing.
Do you know, it's the first time I think I've actually heard hostile questions to him from the media.
Yes.
And he crumples.
Yeah.
He's clearly been given a pass for 4 years, probably half his career. And now he's facing tough questions. You suddenly realize, my goodness, is this guy really president of the United States?
Here's a guy asking him questions that's probably one of the most despicable people that's allowed in media. And it aggravates me because there are no consequences for his behavior. But Stephanopoulos, back during the time when all of these women, and they would probably collectively bigger crowds than Joe Biden is drawing, who were molested, allegedly raped, abused by Bill Clinton from the days he was Attorney General in Arkansas to the days he spent 8 years in the White House. And this guy, his job, George Stephanopoulos' job, was to find these women and to do a character assassination. They could be headed to the convent to serve God as a nun, and when he finished with them, they were drug addicts, most people thought, and prostitutes. He did an incredible job just absolutely targeting these people and tearing down their reputation. That was his job. Hillary Clinton was very, very proud of him for what he was doing. One other thing here, and you just mentioned it as far as the media is concerned, it was exposed over the weekend while we were having our barbecued ribs and everything, but there were a couple of reporters who admitted, I think one was in Philadelphia and one was it was Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I want you to hear that when you come back. And one of the reporters in a local market has already been fired. What they said was, the president, all of the questions, we had to process the questions. They were all fed to us. And,
it's crazy.
And it's not good. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy that he's still in there. But I want you to hear the soundbite for yourself. We're with Douglas Carswell, and we'll turn our attention to stateside issues when we come back right after this. One other thing here, President Biden's campaign is no longer going to feed pre-screened questions to media interviewers after a radio host out of the campaign's practice this week, according to the New York Post. This was last week. Radio host Andrea Sanders, who interviewed Biden last week, revealed during the discussion on CNN the president's team provided a list of questions to approve prior to the interview, to which I think, and Douglas Carswell is my guest. Douglas is president and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Douglas, whoever writes this stuff and these people who are there working for is, I think, closer to the people who are pulling the strings than to the president himself. Here's the way the interview went down from CNN host Victor Blackwell.
You asked 4 questions, and maybe that's what you were allowed to ask by the campaign or the White House, but they were essentially... questions, both interviews, about accomplishments, progress in your respective state, what's at stake in the election, what he has to say about his debate performance, and what he would say to voters who think their vote doesn't matter or might sit this election out. Were those questions given to you by the White House, or did you have, or the campaign, or did you have to submit questions ahead of this interview?
The questions were sent to me for approval. I approved of them.
Okay, so the White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview?
Yes.
Okay.
I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
Okay. And the reason I ask is not a criticism of either view. It's just that if the White House is trying now to prove the vim, vigor, acuity of the president, I don't know how they do that by sending questions first before the interview so that the president knows what's coming.
This poor lady was fired, but one of the hosts were fired. Probably both will be fired after this. But she felt like she had some modicum of power by him giving her 8, and she could choose 4.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
these liberal broadcasters think of themselves as Woodward and Bernstein. They're not. They're mouthpiece, PL pieces for people with power. It's extraordinary. They've forgotten what it means to be a journalist.
Turning our attention to a couple of the articles you've had over the past on the website. One was quite interesting, detailing the Mississippi's Department of Education. It was quick to trumpet signs of an improvement in education standards. According to a gushing press release they put out, Mississippi has risen up to the national education rankings from 48th to 30th. But then you kind of tear it down a little bit or put some reality to it, and I'll let you have the mic to explain why.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to ask some questions, some uncomfortable questions. Why is it that Mississippi conservatives haven't really achieved a huge amount in over a decade of holding office? If you stop and think about it, our neighboring states like Arkansas and Alabama and Louisiana have achieved more towards school choice, for example, in 12 months than Mississippi conservatives have achieved in 12 years. Why is this? Why is it that Mississippi conservatives just don't really seem to be delivering despite having a super massive majority? And I think part of the problem is because Mississippi conservatives often, or Mississippi leaders, choose to indulge and believe that things are better than they really are. And I think key to this is this so-called myth of the Mississippi miracle in education. And I think we need to have an uncomfortable conversation about the truth about education standards in Mississippi. Now, there have been 2 claims put forward, one by the Mississippi Department of Education. They trumpeted this report saying in national education rankings, Mississippi has gone from 48th to 30th over the past decade. Gee, we're 30th now, wow. And the other claim has been that between 2015 and 2022, Mississippi 4th grade reading standards rose from 46th to 18th. And I did a bit of digging into the data. It's not quite what is claimed. The truth is that average 4th grade NAEP scores in reading have moved slightly, but the only reason we've risen up the rankings is because standards in other states fell far lower. And then I started doing a bit of research into some of the facts rather than the propaganda about standards in Mississippi education. And I discovered that despite all the claims, the propaganda claims about improved graduation rates, 1 in 4 school children in our state are chronically absent. That to me tells us that actually we need an honest conversation about where we really are. 8 out of 10 8th grade kids in Mississippi are not proficient in maths. Almost 7 in 10 4th grade kids in Mississippi are not proficient in reading. Now, when a politician tells you there's been a Mississippi miracle, ask yourself this fundamental question. Would they be willing to send their child to a school where 4 in 10 4th graders were not even reaching the basic reading standard? Because that is what happens on average in Mississippi public schools. Almost 4 out of 10 4th graders in our state are not even reaching the basic reading standard. I think we should stop talking about the Mississippi miracle, have an honest conversation about the poor standards, and recognize that we need change. And the only way to fix this problem is school choice. And we need to ask ourselves, why are we not delivering? Why is our conservative supermajority not delivering the kinds of reforms that we now see in all the conservative-controlled states around us? It's going to be a difficult conversation, but I think it's now time to have an honest conversation if we want to improve things.
As a native Mississippian, when I hear you say that with an accent, I got to make sure I understand that you are now a fellow Mississippian.
This is my home. I love it.
I understand that, and we love you to death. But there is some natural-born instinct in me saying I don't think he fully understands the state of Mississippi as someone who's been here and born here. So the way I look at this is saying, okay, you are right as far as statistically is concerned. And you look at 140 years of Democrat-controlled, total control, supermajority. When the opposing party can meet in a phone book, it would be a long time of Democrat rule. Plus the fact, everything, and I've said this over and over, everything from deciding to clear the land was Democrat, to put the foundation, I'm talking about the analogy of the Constitution, the state Constitution, laws, bylaws, et cetera, rules, regulations, all of these things are the blueprint of Democrats. They built the building, the Democrat building, they have controlled that building for 140 years. So in 12 years... You think, and it's not been a supermajority for 12 years, but for Democrat control for 12 years, you think all of those should be completely solved and we should be better off?
No, I don't, Paul. What I think is, for example, that we should look at Louisiana, where they've only had a Republican governor for 12 months, and yet a month ago we saw the conservatives in Louisiana, despite only having control of the state for 12 months, achieve full-blown universal school choice.
Okay.
So if
wait. Now, I agree with you, but you don't want. It's almost like it's almost like Joe Biden pointing to the crowds. You don't want to get into a fist fight on this as far as what's going on in Louisiana that's good versus what's bad, because there are a lot of things, crime and everything else in Louisiana that's out of control.
Then let's look at Alabama. Let's look at why Alabama has achieved more for school choice in 12 months than Mississippi has achieved in 12 years, or Arkansas. I mean, you commented on the fact that I don't sound Mississippian, and I apologize for the fact that
don't apologize.
I wasn't born in
love
Mississippi.
That. Don't get me wrong. It is a Southern England.
It's a grave imperfection for me not to have been born Mississippian, and I apologize for that. I'm trying to make amends. But look at Arkansas. Reform in Arkansas came with an Arkansas accent. Reform in Alabama came with an Alabama accent. Reform in Mississippi can come with a Mississippi accent. The question is, you're not going to achieve the change that we need. You're not going to achieve school choice in Mississippi if you indulge the myth of the Mississippi miracle.
You're basing everything on the school choice itself. You and I are on the same page as far as school choice. I think we need school choice. Some modicum, we've said that for a long time.
But why aren't we getting it?
I am hoping that we'll simply because I don't think there is a majority of electorate out there of voters who want it right now.
Well, actually, there's polling evidence that shows it is wildly popular. The problem is that conservative Mississippi wants school choice. The leaders of conservative Mississippi are not giving it. There's a disconnect between what conservative Mississippi wants and what conservative leaders are giving. The issue is not the people don't want it. The issue is that the leaders are not providing leadership.
When you say want it, how do you define it? It's almost like a Democrat saying, I want to get gun control.
School choice.
And what is an assault rifle?
School choice.
What is school choice?
School choice is giving mums and dads control over their share of tax dollars. It's not about just having 8 charter schools. It's about universal school choice so that every mum and dad in Mississippi would get between $7,000 and $9,000 a year paid into an account which they could then allocate to a school of their choice. This is
and where we're having some problems with that is there are some people who says if you're going to private school right now, if you are someone who's making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, $1 million a year, your tuition is also going to be paid for through that, and you're included in that. Well, there are others who said let's just do public school first. So we're not all. We'll continue to talk about it. Nobody's. I don't think we're all on the same page on that yet. It will happen.
Well, it's the
it
one
just
thing
takes a little time.
From Donald Trump to most conservative Mississippians, it's the one thing that unites conservative America, and yet for some reason Mississippi conservatives are not doing it.
Well, it's almost like the CONs, but we'll talk about that too coming up next. Let me return with Douglas Carswell, President and CEO, Mississippi Center for Public Policy. I probably need to correct the point of saying that most Mississippians don't want it. I did see some polls where the majority of people in the state do want it. I guess I should have said there are some people in key areas. And as noted on C Spark text line, I think this is true too, we have a lot of Republicans who were Democrats not that long ago. And I think that kind of figures into the equation one way or the other. If it were a vote and I happen to be there on universal, yes, all in on it. Because I think to bring competition to education is the one thing that would help it.
It's the only thing that's fundamentally going to improve it. Now, we can argue about the detail, and we can discuss the detail. Should we go for the full-blown Arkansas model where it extends to private as well as public schools? Should we have a more limited thing so it's only school choice, universal school choice within the public sector as a first step? We can have that discussion, but we need to be having this discussion. The reality is, though, that we've had 12 years of notional conservative majorities in Mississippi and almost zero progress made towards this. And I repeat the point I made earlier because it's worth emphasizing. The surrounding states around us have made more progress on school choice in 12 months than Mississippi's so-called conservatives have made in 12 years. We need to ask difficult questions as to why.
I don't know if any of those states have been doing it long enough to have some data that says this is the panacea that's going to solve it or increase education instead of the continued slide.
They don't yet, because Arkansas, which is the first to implement it, is only just doing it now. But other states, particularly Arizona and West Virginia, do. And it shows a dramatic transformation. Suddenly, everyone in that state has opportunities. The values in the education system are suddenly aligned with the values of the mums and dads and the parents. Because if you have school choice, you cannot have woke teachers and politically correct educators teaching values that don't align with yours and your families. It's the only way, incidentally, we're going to drive out DEI in the education system. So we are starting to see results both in improved standards and a realignment of values in those states like Arizona and West Virginia. Absolutely.
That curve is a lot like the charter schools, also in the fact that where there are schools, where there is school choice, the schools that are underperforming traditionally begin to perform like they're supposed to be.
Yep. It's amazing what a little bit of competition can do. But, in Mississippi, politicians will tell you, I believe in school choice, they will say. But then, they will cite charter schools. The fact is, the sorry fact is we have a total of 10 charter schools a decade after the legislation was passed. The story of our charter schools is, why don't we have them?
We are beginning to focus our attention on how bad and how caustic the absenteeism in our state. Yeah. And we really haven't done that before, but now when you start looking at the data out there, the absenteeism in this state is dismal.
Instead of sort of Soviet-era type tractor production target data and propaganda telling us that graduation has improved, we need to put attention on the fact that currently over 100,000 children in Mississippi, 100,000 children in Mississippi are chronically absent. Forget your graduation rates. Why are 1 in 4 kids not showing up? The only way you can fix this is through universal school choice.
Well, how would school choice help as far as absenteeism is concerned?
Because you would be giving parents the ability to choose the education that's right for their child. You would be aligning their interests and the child's interests with that of the education they get. If 1 in 4 customers isn't coming into your restaurant, if 1 in 4 customers isn't showing up, it tells you you're not offering them the right thing. Give parents power, give them control of their tax dollars, and they will spend that money in an education setting in a context that suits them and their families. That's not happening at the moment. That's why these kids aren't showing up.
I do want to ask you about CON, though, because you guys have been working on this for a long time. Did we make any inroads to, as far as what your thoughts are?
A little bit of progress. We've gone from having a state legislature that would not even allow these things to come out of committee because the people appointed to the committee were on the side of the vested interest. We're now in a situation where, to the great credit of our new speaker, Jason White, who is actually genuinely conservative and is actually trying to do authentically conservative things, he's holding an inquiry into this. A committee is going to be looking at this in November. And they're going to be asking the fundamental question, why do we have these so-called con laws, these certificate of need laws? For people who don't know what that means, it's regulation that prevents the expansion of any healthcare facility in Mississippi without a permit. It's a sort of socialist system for healthcare in Mississippi? Why do we have a socialist system of healthcare in Mississippi? Wouldn't it be better if we got rid of those intentionally restrictive laws and allowed anyone who wants to set up a new healthcare facility or expand one to do so? Obviously, to me as a free marketeer, the obvious answer is get rid of the regulations. But it's good that for the first time we have an authentic attempt to remove these restrictions. But it does raise some fundamental questions as to what's been going on when a conservative-run state for 12 years has allowed a socialist system of healthcare to be perpetuated. Clearly something is badly wrong.
Because it's been here a long time, it's so ingrained, and I understand that,
because
being
of the good
a
old
native
boys,
Mississippian. But,
it's the good old boys and the vested interests, the cartel politics, and the things that have been holding back this state for decades, and those things need to go. There's
Douglas Carswell, president of Mississippi Center for Public Policy. But Douglas, also, when you start looking at this, you kind of hurt feelings a little bit as far as Republicans or conservatives in the state, and that's okay. That's what you're here for.
Facts.
Well, when you start looking at things like the flag, the flag of the state of Mississippi, how tough that was, never touched by Democrats. That was a big deal if you're a Mississippian, and still. Many of the conclaves around the state, it's still a big deal and a lot of hurt feelings. That was a tough thing to do for newly into power Republicans to actually do. Monumental. Tax reform to the point of saying, we're going to cut your personal income tax. That was an easy thing to do.
It could have been eliminated. I mean, other states are moving towards full elimination. We still have a huge surplus. Okay. Why aren't we using that surplus to eliminate the income tax rather than just reduce it?
As you said before, and you alluded to, we've made progress to the point where some of these things, not only are they done and signed by the governor incrementally, but we've also had some that we've had discussions on that got out of committee, and some of even got to the floor where we voted. Some of them didn't make it out of committee, some of them didn't make it on the floor vote, and some maybe not even made it as far as the governor's veto. But we are making progress on that.
Sometimes when things so-called died in committee, people talk about it as though it's a random act of nature. I think we need to ask, well, who is it who's killing it in committee, and who appointed these people to committee? And why do we have, for example, in the Senate, anti-school choice Democrats in committees that allow things to die in committee? Things die in committee because the people who run those committees choose to kill them, and people choose to appoint those people to committees. Why do we put up with this?
That's a whole ball of wax again, and you're absolutely right about that one. But then, as far as maybe a lot of things that are squirrely, you just mentioned you were in Parliament. Does everything run smooth there?
No, it doesn't. But in order for things to change in politics, you need to push them. And maybe the reason why things haven't changed in a conservative direction in Mississippi, maybe one of the reasons why there's been no real significant strategic reform to improve our state and stop it being 50th out of 50th, is because we haven't been pushing enough. Maybe we need to start pushing. You talked about hurting feelings. Facts don't care about Republican Party feelings. The fact is that there is a huge Southern success story out there. States around us are prospering and growing. We're still exporting our brightest and our best because we failed to make the changes that Mississippi desperately needs, and we need to recognize this, and we need to be prepared to ruffle feathers and say, hang on, if you vote conservative and campaign as conservatives, maybe you should actually start to do more than simply change the flag and tweak the income tax. Maybe we need some far-reaching change to deliver the kind of conservative reforms that conservative Mississippi has a right to expect, starting with school choice, starting with income tax elimination. Those are the kind of things that states all around us are doing, and we're not. And we need to ask difficult questions as to why.
I don't disagree with you, and I wish we could do those, but I do understand and have reasonable, I'm reasonable to the point of understanding if somebody tells me maybe fiscally we can't do this all at once, we have to do it incrementally, little by little.
Of course.
It sounds great, just do it all at one time, but you also have that other part of it. Do you do it responsibly?
Gradual change is great, but after 10 years when there's been not even much gradual change, I think conservative Mississippi has a right to ask, why not? If there was incremental reform, great, but after 10 years, where is the increment?
I will say this, it is good to have groups like what you guys have there at Public Policy pushing that, though, one way or the other. It is good to have a voice like that. I'll give you the final thoughts when we come back in a minute or two. on the other side of this. But one more thing on the CON. Is that going to be a push as far as the 2025 legislative session?
Absolutely. We need to push and, if necessary, embarrass politicians who are holding up common sense, free market reform that would improve education. There's been a lot of debate about Medicaid expansion, and there are good people on both sides of that debate. But there's one thing that every conservative in Mississippi ought to be able to agree on, and that is remove these intentionally restrictive certificate of need laws. Do that, and more people will be able to get affordable health care than they do today.
Got it. Top 3 issues that the President and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy, Douglas Carswell, will have on his sheet for the 2025. I think it's probably one of them. But we'll do that when we return. Final segment in just a moment. Thoughts here. But on the top 3, I would imagine CON is going to be one of those. Or I may be wrong. But
school choice, tax cuts, repeal certificate of need. I think those have got to be. If Mississippi conservatives actually did those 3 things, it would dramatically improve the state. It really would.
The states around us are moving to that direction, slowly but surely. One of the things we cannot forget is we carry, I mean, blame it on anybody you want to, but we carry a large portion of poverty that other states don't. And that drags us down in a multitude of ways.
Well, I would say, with respect, Paul, you've got that the wrong way around. The reason why we have poverty is because we haven't made these changes. The reason why Mississippi has been held back is because we don't have a functioning education system, even though we pretend we do. We have certificate of need restrictions that favor producer interests, not the ordinary Mississippian. The reason why Mississippi has been held back and has atrocious levels of workforce participation is a reflection of the failure to reform the education system. So to say that we are held back because we have poverty, no. Poverty is a reflection of the failure of conservatives in Mississippi to implement the kind of changes happening in states all
I don't
around us.
disagree with you on that one, and I find myself being, and I'm a very aggressive guy wanting to get it done. We've been pushing for this for a very, very long time, and I understand that. But 12 years is not a lot of time, and there has been a lot of progress. And for anybody to say that in 12 years all of these things should be completed and we should be on the road to La La Land, whatever, is a little bit incorrect.
Paul, how long did it take Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, to implement
she can
universal
proclaim
school choice?
anything and she can pass anything. First of all, she didn't.
Well, she passed it in 24 months.
Arkansas doesn't carry the amount of poverty that we do.
It's got a delta like we do. The demographics
it does,
are very
but
similar.
the numbers are not the same, and they have more.
Actually, it's uncannily similar to us in so many ways. And if Arkansas can do it in 24 months, why haven't we done it in 12 years?
All right. First of all, I think that when you start looking at some of these things, we are moving slowly but surely in the right way. And if you don't pat somebody on the back for the achievements and you belittle those achievements, I think that's as detrimental as criticizing them.
Well, maybe it's time to ruffle a few feathers because the sort of mutual applause society hasn't actually achieved much in 12 years, has it? Good intentions are not enough. We need to see progress on things like school choice and tax cuts and removing certificate of need. And I think that Mississippi can be part of that Southern success story, but nothing changes in politics without a push, and we need to push.
That said, I don't know what the time limit is where the agreement, where I would have to agree with you, because you're saying 12 years. Is it 15 years? Then I think that's the time limit. Because I'm thinking of things like Con. I think they should have been done a long time ago. I agree with you. School choice. When you look at the legislature actually giving a competitive amount of money to teachers, it didn't happen for a long part of 140 years, and in 12 years it has come up dramatically. And I could go, third grade reading gate may not have been the panacea that you wanted, but it didn't happen in 140 years. It happened under the Republican leadership. Yeah, and we could go on and on with a lot of different things such as that.
There was a law in 2013 passed in 2013 that insisted on the use of phonics, and that undoubtedly improved reading standards. but the effect of that improvement was felt by 2019. You're talking about, with respect, Paul, a law passed 10 years ago. What fundamental change in education have we seen since? What have we done? Okay, there's been progress towards creating an individualized system of school funding reform. We were very
I'm sitting here and having to defend a situation where education in every school district in the nation, by and large, the majority of them, is held in a handbasket. And if you want to put it that way, at least ours is lesser in the held on a handbasket.
It could be so much better, though. It really could. We're missing an opportunity because the things that we need to do and could do, and conservatives should do. One of the really exciting things about the November election is we could actually have a president in the White House who is more pro-school choice than any previous president.
Yeah.
And then I think it would be really odd if Mississippi conservatives or notional conservatives still try and find excuses not to do it. I mean, at what point do we say, hang on, what is it you're actually doing to improve education in Mississippi?
I guess what we need to do is just model the model of efficiency, and that would be Parliament.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't model anything on Parliament. You guys broke away in 1776 for a very good reason.
Touche. Thank you for mentioning that. And now you're here in Mississippi, so there's got to be some good to it.
Well.
Yeah,
the reason why the United States works so well is you've got 50 different systems, and you can compare and borrow good ideas. Let's borrow from Arkansas and Alabama.
And that in itself is a good marketplace test. You're right. Douglas Carswell, wish we had more time. Always a great, energetic conversation. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Thank you.
Got more.